I will be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that. Hello out there in podcast land. Ladies and gentlemen, this is another edition of The Road Less Traveled. I am your humble host, Mr. Dennis Carroll. And tonight we're going to do our episode on Lost Treasure. And here is your other humble host, Mr. Gerald Fountain. Hello, Gerald. You ready to travel down the road again, brother? You don't have any sound there,
Yeah,
Gerald.
I muted
Your
myself
sound's
during the
gone.
intro. Yeah, I got my
There we go.
backpack all
Okay.
ready to go.
Hit the mute button on. I play with the mute button sometimes. You ready to go down the road less traveled tonight?
Yep, I'm ready.
We're gonna be looking for lost treasure down that road tonight. Absolutely. Want to welcome everybody coming in the chat room here. It's starting to fill up. Dawn Morris and Shiro and Midwest Night Watchers and Monica. Hello, Monica. Wizard Moon. Hello, Wizard Moon. Okay, we're starting to slowly build up here. They're gathering in the grotto, Gerald.
All right.
And I call it a grotto. Maybe you might want to call it a chat cave, whichever. Anyway,
Chat cave.
we're going to be talking a very interesting subject tonight, lost treasure. I've always wanted to find some treasure here, folks, okay? Absolutely. And I was telling Gerald earlier, my favorite kind of treasure is pirate treasure, okay? It's got a lot of gold doubloons and diamonds and stuff like that in it. So it's really neat kind of treasure, yeah. But there are a lot of lost treasures in this world still out there, absolutely. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. You got any announcements you want to give out there, Gerald, about any upcoming shows you got coming or anything like that?
Yeah, just yesterday on Piercing the Veil, we had Brian Minnick from Montauk is Strange, and that was a great show. Brian is so well versed. He spent
Yeah, I
his
watched some of that. It was good. That was good. I watched it, some of it. Yeah.
he spent a lot of time, his whole childhood through adulthood on Camp Hero and Montauk. So that was really great. And this weekend we'll have creepy movies again, and then Sunday we'll have Heidi Pop.
Oh, Heidi's gonna be on. Oh, okay. What time is that gonna be?
6 p.m. Central on Sunday.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll have to check that out. She's always good too. And Brian's a great fella too. I enjoyed. I had him on my show one time, and got to get him back on again one day. We need to talk some more about the drones and stuff going on up there. He's got a lot. I'm gonna tell you, Montauk is a very, very strange place. I call it a crossroads of strangeness.
Right.
A lot of interesting stuff up there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a strange thing. I mean, just like he said the other night that there's a cross point, a vortex where all the ley lines connect right there on that island.
Mm-hmm. And somebody was talking about that the other day about ley lines, and we might have to do a show on that one day, definitely, girl. But ley lines also, they think, figure into the migration of birds.
Yes, very well. I'm sure they use the magnetic. I'm sure they use the magnetic fields to home in and know how to migrate. And I'm assuming the ley lines play into that.
Absolutely, that's some wild stuff. It really is. But we've talked about that before. The Earth is a living thing in many ways, very much like a living organism, and it has its own energy. It has its own plasma, which is the blood of the Earth, I guess you would call it. Or black oil might be the blood of the Earth, whichever one you want to call it that. But anyway, it has a blood vein-like system. It has an energy system to it. And there's a lot of theory that there is a sun in the center of the earth, a molten sun,
Right.
It's fascinating stuff, absolutely. And we talked about some of that time we were talking about the crop circles, and I was telling you the other day the crop circles could be alien graffiti, folks. You never know. They could be stopping over and doing a little graffiti on us here.
That's right.
There's been a study. I don't know if you're aware of this, Gerald, but there's been a study that a lot of these crop circles lie along ley lines. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Freaky stuff. Yeah.
I'm assuming that's why there's a lot of them there by Stonehenge.
And if all of you listening out there are big fans of some of the good old movies and TV shows, be sure to check out Gerald's Rumble channel. And when's that going? When do you usually run those movies there, Gerald?
Friday and Saturday night at 10 p.m. Central.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, be sure to stop in and check that out because he has some good ones on there. I like the old stuff. This trash they're trying to put out nowadays doesn't even hold my interest very much. I watched that that new Nosferatu the other day. It was okay, but it was never touched the original. Okay, ain't no way because that is a work of art. Okay,
right.
But I think most of the excuse for making this new Nosferatu so that Johnny Depp's daughter, Lily Rose Depp, could take her clothes off. I think that was about it. But anyway, but it was. I mean, it had its moments, but I wouldn't pay money for it. Okay,
right? Yeah, if you like black and white monster movies or suspense movies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and be sure to check it out. And we just added the newest thing we just added is we're running a complete series of X-Files.
And by the way, Lily Rose Depp looks like a female Johnny Depp. Okay. But anyway, but you know me, I'm a big fan of vampire movies, so I had to check it out. But the one I haven't watched yet is the one they did about the ship. What was the name of that?
About the what?
Yeah. I need to check that one. I haven't seen that one yet. They say that was pretty good. I don't know. But I've always wanted to know what went on that ship. When Dracula was coming to England on that ship.
Oh yeah.
I always wanted to check. Yeah. A lot. A lot's not talked about in the book about that. So that was kind of interesting, But anyway, getting back to the subject at hand, lost treasures. When I think of lost treasure, one of my favorite lost treasure movies was The Treasure of Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart. That's a great movie. Talking about a good movie to run on your channel. That's a good one there, Gerald. Although it's not a monster movie, it is a good adventure, a great adventure movie.
We'll probably get to stuff like that eventually.
It kind of shows what happens to you with gold fever gets a hold of you,
Yeah.
I never had that problem. I never had any gold again. But anyway, that would be a good movie to run. That's a good old movie there, definitely. The Treasure of Sierra Madre. And the treasure went back to the mountain. Absolutely. But there are a lot of lost treasures, a lot of stories and legends out there. Even where I live, I've talked about that before. They made a movie on the list, the Covenant list of South Carolina. It has something to do with, lost Confederate gold. And that is a big legend around these parts that supposedly in the last days of the Civil War, the Confederate Treasury sent out about 10 wagons of gold to hide somewhere in Savannah, Georgia, somewhere like that. And supposedly the wagons never made it to their destination.
Yeah.
They were lost somewhere between South Carolina and Georgia, supposedly. But a lot of people have tried to trace that back, Gerald. And here's the thing about lost treasure. just like the paranormal and all the rest of this stuff, you got to cut through the layers of legend to get to the real heart of the matter, the real truth of it. And there's a lot of legends built up around. A lot of legends built up around lost gold. There's some gold right there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
it looks like something sitting in Fort Knox kind of gold right there.
Yeah, that's some gold bars sitting right there on the south.
I don't know about you. Now, here's another good movie you could show if you get and that was Kelly's Heroes, my favorite wartime movie. Remember they stole all that Nazi gold? And we're going to be talking about the Nazi gold here in a little while, but that's one of my favorite war movies, Kelly's Heroes with Clint Eastwood. But
I like
it
that
looks
movie.
kind of like, it reminds me of those gold bars in that movie. That's what it looks like. But absolutely, there's a lot of treasure out there. And I'm going to tell you the story in a little while about some treasure that was found in Missouri that was hidden by the very famous Jesse James.
Oh,
And
nice.
I'll tell the story about that in a minute. Very interesting because it's almost like a detective story. Okay. And that's what you got to be if you're going to be a treasure hunter. You got to be kind of a detective too. You got to trace these things down. But it was found out that this Confederate gold, well, there actually was no gold left in the Confederate treasury. Okay, and there might have been maybe a few coins, but that was about it. The rest of what was in the treasure was paper money,
which was
and
no
we
good.
know what kind of paper money that was. Confederate notes. It wasn't worth the paper was printed on. Okay. That's where that went, and that was supposed to be the real truth of the matter. That gold, there never was any gold to begin with, supposedly. But the story is that when the Yankee soldiers were closing in Georgia and all that, that they actually buried that gold in Georgia and burnt the wagons on top of it. And like maybe 4 or 5 drivers made a deal that they would all come back later on after the war and get the gold. But most of them died. Some of them died, in the war. Some of them didn't, I think one survived, and he tried to tell somebody where it was at. But that's the legend part of it, folks. Okay. That's not, as far as we know, as far as we can ascertain it, that's not really, really what truly happened. And there were not like 10 wagons. It was like one wagon, I think. So, and it had what was called species on it. It had maybe a few coins, but it mostly had paper money on it. But the reason they had hopes that the South would rise again and that money would be worth something, and that's why they wanted to keep it.
Right.
And by the way, when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, he had a Confederate note in his pocketbook, by the way, folks.
Oh.
As a souvenir. It is worth now, and antique wise, it's worth a lot of money, more money than it was worth then, unfortunately, if you have any Confederate bills. But that's the legend where I'm at in my neck of the woods. You got anything like that around your neck of the woods there, Gerald?
Not that I know of. I'm sure there's probably something, but I have not heard of anything in our neck of the woods. Just I have a list of ones, but it's just the ones that we always talk about. So there might be a couple new ones in there. Maybe somebody hasn't heard, but we can go through that as we go.
Well, a lot of treasure stories come out of the Civil War, especially in the South. People hiding their valuables and the jewelries and stuff like that, But here's the sad thing about that. By the end of the war, nobody had any money or jewels left. They traded all for food to eat. That was probably where most of the family treasures went to, unless and there's always a percentage of these things. Some people died and didn't retrieve that treasure, and it's still out there waiting, which is where the great hobby of metal detecting comes in at.
Right.
Because there's been a lot of stuff found with metal detectors like that, and that's a good hobby. That is fine. I have a metal detector myself. And it is, I'll usually always find car tags. That's about what I find. I mean, anyway, it is fun, though, because you never know what you might dig up. Actually, I was digging in my yard, and let's just illustrate a point. it's been a good many years back. I was digging a hole out of my yard to plant something, and I actually dug up a mini ball,
Oh,
or
really?
really, it's a musket. It was a musket ball. It was predated. It predated the Civil War because I had it looked at, and it was probably something, back in the Revolutionary War, somewhere along there. And that's how old it was. Now, you wouldn't dream of finding something like that in your yard, But I figured maybe, it might not, because there was no big battle around here. So it probably somebody was hunting, with one of those guns,
Right.
Yeah. But you never know what you're going to find.
There might be some lost treasure up by the Great Lakes. That'd be the closest thing to us here in central Illinois would be Lake Michigan and all the other Great Lakes that maybe had shipwrecks that had some gold or silver on it.
Well, every ship of the line had a safe. Even the Titanic had several safes on board, and they still talk about to this day trying to get into those safes, because there was some very valuable stuff, not just money now wise, but very valuable antique stuff. I think one of the very first radios was in one of these things or something like that. But anyway, every ship on line had a safe. And then when you went on the ship, it was like a hotel. I know if you've ever stayed in a hotel, most hotels offer a safe,
Right.
You can keep your valuables in. That's what you did on the ship. And if the ship sunk, that was the treasure on the ship, was whatever was in that safe, So that's what you would dive for. That's what you would be looking for.
Right.
Most ships, unless it was, a ship transporting gold bullion, that's a different story. That's my kind of ship right there. Okay. But actually, that was the way it went with the ships and stuff like that. And they have actually, and just a little side note on that, they have actually, like in New York and Chicago, they have torn down a lot of old buildings, and they look for these safes in the buildings because they're like time capsules,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows what you'd find in some of those, especially the older buildings.
Oh, yeah. And I have actually seen YouTube videos, and anybody can watch them on YouTube, where they have gotten these safes and old ATM machines, and they start attacking them, trying to open them, and buddy, I'm going to tell you what, you got a job on your hands trying to open something like that. Absolutely.
I like the videos of people remodeling their houses and finding stuff like thousands of dollars or jewels or coins or whatever, when they're remodeling.
Well, let me tell you a quick story, and I'm sure you've heard of this, Gerald, but maybe some of my listeners haven't. When they renovated the house across the street from Ford's Theater, they tore out a wall of one of these houses, and this was the house where I think they brought Lincoln when he was shot.
Oh.
And they actually found a dress. You remember this? They found a dress in the wall that had the bloodstains from Lincoln on it.
Wow.
Yeah. You never know what you're going to find, what kind of treasure you're going to. Treasure is not just jewels and coins and gold bullion. It can be other things as well,
Yeah. I know in the settler days, they would take old worn out shoes, clothing, and they would stuff it in the walls for insulation. So that's a lot of times if you renovate or tear down an old house, you'll find umbrellas and newspapers and shoes. And
well, here's the interesting thing, a little side note on that, Gerald. Historians knew about this dress, but didn't know where it was. They thought it was lost, They knew about this dress because they knew who the woman was that was wearing it. And I think she was the one that was sitting in the box when he was shot or something. And she was like, she was with a man that was not, she was her fiance or something like that. He was a soldier or something. Anyway, I can't remember her name. You probably know. I don't. Anyway, she kept it as a keepsake, but didn't want it around. It was just something that seemed like, bad luck or bad omen thing, and she
Right.
didn't. So she just, they for storage sake, they put it in the wall, and that's where they found it, and it was forgotten, until they
Wow.
found it accidentally. That's an amazing thing to think about. And here's what always boggles my mind, Gerald. When you hear about things like that, you have to wonder what else is out there that nobody's found yet,
Yeah, I mean, there's probably all kinds of stuff that we never hear about or people haven't found yet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about a few of them tonight that we know are out there somewhere, but nobody knows where they're at. But I think one of the most famous ones is one of your favorites, Gerald, and that is the Lost Dutchman Mine.
Oh,
You want to tell everybody a little bit? We're going to run down the history on that a little bit.
Well, from what I remember, is that the Lost Dutchman is there in the Superstition Mountains where the old timer was out there mining and found tons of gold, and he would bring it into town, and he'd be sneaking in and out, going different ways so nobody would ever find it. And supposedly there's a curse on it that anybody that tries to steal the gold from the Lost Dutchman would have a curse.
Of course, a lot of great treasures are supposed to have curses on them. You remember when they opened King Tut's tomb? It's supposed they had a curse on it. And it's fascinating. And, I was reading the other day about Shakespeare, where Shakespeare is buried. He has a curse on his tombstone. If you mess with his bones, there's a curse on you. So that thing, that was, I think, a lot of times done as a deterrent, so maybe if I put a curse on it, they'll leave it alone, kind of thing. But, here's the interesting thing about pirate treasure, Gerald. When pirates buried it, they usually killed somebody, or the men that buried it, they killed them or unalived them and buried them with the treasure so that their ghost would guard it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Let me answer this question right quick. Yes, my book is still being put together right now. Okay, but as soon as as soon as it's released and everything, I will definitely let everybody know about it. Absolutely, and I appreciate your interest and that you like the show on vampires. Tune in Wednesday is Werewolf Wednesday. Okay, you might like that too. Okay.
Oh.
So check that out. But anyway, thank you, and I'll let everybody know when the book is available. Absolutely. Go ahead, Gerald. What we got here?
Oh, I just brought up a picture since you were talking about pirates.
Oh yeah, the pirates. Yeah, that's interesting. And that brings us to you think about the Lost Dutchman Mine, which is supposedly, I think it has a little rumor to it of the Aztec gold and stuff, right? That there was supposed to be some Aztec gold supposedly hidden around there somewhere as well. And then it might have been part of the Lost Dutchman's mine. But he was supposed to be pulling out chunks of gold out of the Lost Dutchman. So it wasn't like we talked about earlier before the show, panning for gold. It wasn't that kind of a deal. This was taking out big chunks out of a mine kind of gold. That's the good kind of gold right there.
Right. I mean, that's the thing about these old miners. They'd show up in town and they'd be flashing gold around and buying drinks and eating good, and everybody starts wondering, okay, how's this guy affording all this all of a sudden?
Absolutely. You didn't advertise. If you had gold, or found gold, that was a state secret. You didn't advertise that. You could get yourself unalived or your claim jumped if you're not careful about that. So you had to be very careful. And if you transported your gold, most of the time they didn't transport it all at one time. It was a little bit at a time. They would bring in a little bit at a time, put it in a bank or whatever.
Right.
Smart though, a smart thing to do. But there's always been throughout the Southwest stories of lost Aztec gold. Supposedly, some of it's found in the Grand Canyon. There's, the big secret cavern down there. Supposedly, it has a lot of Aztec gold in it. And then, of course, you got the very famous Oak Island. That island has a curse on it too, by the way. Oak Island is very famous, and they think that it goes back. Some evidence has been found on Oak Island of the Roman era type stuff.
Yeah, Roman era, and there's
Yeah.
been all kinds of rumors. Even like the Ark of the Covenant and stuff like that. Was at Oak Island, and that ties in with the Templars.
Yeah, and I came across an article the other day. I sent it to our friend Jessica Jones. They actually had some CIA information that CIA had employed remote viewers to find the Ark of the Covenant, and they supposedly found it, and it was very interesting. They said that where it was at, it was hidden very well, and that it was guarded by several entities. Now, what they meant by that, I don't know. You and I both know, you're all about the Wyatt guy that said he found it and then it was guarded by angels. Remember that? Well,
Right.
these remote viewers are actually backing up what he said when you read it.
Yeah, I
it
have that.
sounds like that.
I have that PDF from the government talking with the remote viewing project on the Ark of the Covenant, and it's really interesting. Has a bunch of pictures, the hand draw, like Jessica does. She draws out symbols and whatever she sees, and this document is no different. It has a picture of these entities up on the wall watching the Ark.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of, what he said, that it was guarded by angels and it would be revealed at the time it was supposed to be revealed, in other words. And that goes right along with biblical prophecy, definitely. Okay, absolutely. But that it would be one of the greatest treasures in the world. If anyone ever to find that is definitely one of the greatest lost treasures supposedly out there. But we don't know what's waiting for us under the sands of Egypt, for that matter. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There could be anything on the sands of Egypt. But like these remote viewers with the looking for the Ark of the Covenant, which is fascinating when you think about it, they didn't say that it wasn't there. They said it was definitely there. It still exists. And that is good to know if that's very true. If they were on target with it, definitely.
Well, that remote
it gives a little boost to the treasure hunters. You know what I'm saying?
That remote viewer drew exactly the Ark of the Covenant and also the seraphim. He drew an exact picture of what the seraphim looked like on top. And there's just all kinds of details that they put in their remote viewing pages.
Oh, yeah. And remote viewing can be very accurate, not just to objects, but to locations as well, and that is very, very important when you think about it. Matter of fact, I think Jessica has joined us chat tonight. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
Remote viewing can target things to a precise location, and that's interesting to note. That would definitely be a big boon if you were looking for treasure. Think about it, give a remote viewer some coordinates to look something up that, and you might, have a better shot at finding that treasure. Definitely.
Well, I wonder if the remote viewer found it in the same place where that guy took that video where he was looking through the crack and said he saw the Ark of the Covenant buried in that cave.
Oh, they didn't release the location. They found it, but they didn't exactly say in the documents where the location was. But according to Wyatt, his last name is Wyatt, Ron Wyatt, I think his name is. According to him, that it is up under Golgotha.
Right, where the blood of Jesus actually dripped on the altar.
Mm-hmm. Because according to legend, the blood on the cross ran down into the crevice and the cracks and went down on the mercy seat. Now, the mercy seat is part of the ark.
Right.
The covenant itself. And that is biblical prophecy, too, that lamb of God's blood would be on the mercy seat. And when he looked through that crevice, he actually spoke to these angels. supposedly, and they even let him take a picture of it. But the angels told him, "Hey, the time has not come yet for this to be revealed." Yeah. Cryptid Hunt says he's done some treasure hunting for a friend. He offered to give me a cut of the profits behind. There you go. That's a good deal. Definitely take him up on that. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, that would be only fair. If you help me find the treasure, I would definitely cut you in for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I watched that video of him looking through that crack in the wall, and it's a really cool video. I don't know if it's still out there or not, but I watched it a long time ago. And now I have the PDF of the remote viewing from the government.
Well, he has passed away now, but his sons are still doing his work for him. And that man found a lot of biblical stuff. He found the sulfur and brimstone at, Sodom and Gomorrah. He found supposedly chariot wheels in the Red Sea. He found a lot of supposedly biblical stuff. And here's the interesting thing. He claimed that God was showing him where these things were. So he sort of had inside information. He may not have had a remote viewer, but he had inside information, definitely, supposedly. It's fascinating stuff when you think about that. And when you go looking for treasure, like that, you gotta have a little hope that you're gonna find something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You gotta have some clues to go with. And I'm gonna tell you a quick story about Jesse James. Okay. I think this was in Missouri. Now, Jesse James, in most of his career, was a chain robber, I think he may have robbed some stagecoaches and robbed several banks, I know. But anyway, he had he fought in the Civil War, and he rode with Cantrell's Raiders, and they were like guerrilla warfare kind of a thing, in the Civil War. Anyway, he picked this up. The reason I'm telling this is he picked up the ciphers that they use. Okay. In other words, back in the Civil War, you didn't just write out a location or something. You used ciphers,
right,
to keep the enemy from knowing what you're writing, Code is what he was. But anyway, he learned this code from when he was in the war. And this guy, I'll make a long story short, this fella found a marking on a rock in Missouri, big rock side of a hill.
Yep.
And this marking, he said, I've seen that somewhere before, And what it was, I think it was like, I can't remember completely, but it was like a circle with an X in it. And he said it looked kind of like a wagon wheel, but it was missing spokes, It just had an X on it. Anyway, make a long story short, he got to doing research and he found out that Jesse James used this mark. Okay?
Yeah.
And he said, wait a minute, this is too much of a coincidence, that I would find this. So he went back. Here's the interesting thing. Went back to that place and got to digging around at the bottom of this ravine. And he took a metal detector and he picked up something. And guess what he found? He found like 5 or 6 mason jars full of gold coins.
Wow.
Jesse James hid these there from a bank robbery or whatever. And the only reason he found these is he picked up the metal that was still on these mason jars. The mason jar has a metal top.
Right.
And that's what he picked up on. Because the mason jars were broke. I guess, maybe an earthquake or something, or whatever. They were broke. And he got to digging this up and he found the mason jar lids. And he said, well, now why would anybody go out of the way just to bury a mason jar? There had to be something in that mason jar. That's what he thought. And so he dug around there, and sure enough, he found all these gold coins in there from Jesse. So that was a Jesse James bank robber or whatever. And he said the coins were worth a lot of money, but the antique value of them, who put them there, made them more valuable.
Wow.
Interesting, great treasure story.
You always hear those stories, especially over in the UK or England, where people are out digging and they find these great big old swords and big gold chains and lots of coin caches, and it's amazing what people find.
And you got to be incredibly lucky though to find something like that. Like I say, I'm still finding car tags. Okay, but anyway, you got to be incredibly lucky to hit it. I mean, it's just like winning the lottery. You know what I mean? You might make some money, you might not. You might lose your money, but it is fascinating things. And there's a lot of stuff. That's what I say. When you see something like that, and you gotta wonder what else is out there buried that we don't know about. That's just waiting to be found. And there's let me tell you a quick story about a lake. I think it's in the Andes, high up in the Andes, where they say that the Aztecs and Mayans threw gold and as sacrifices into this lake up there. And I think it's a volcanic lake. Used to be a volcano years ago. Now it's filled in.
Right.
And they say that it is so deep, Gerald, that nobody has ever dove in there to find, but they say that it is probably full of gold, but it is so inaccessible to get to it. It may stay there forever. Think about that. There's a huge treasure that may be waiting in this lake, and nobody can get to it.
Absolutely.
That's wild. But there's a lot of treasure, now, war, like we mentioned earlier, war, and that includes like in the Roman era, and things like that, and in the conquistadors and the Spanish, there you go, there's a conquistador right there, and all that. War creates treasures, because people hide treasures during wars and stuff like that we talked about earlier. And that's where supposedly a lot of this Aztec and Mayan gold is still out there somewhere. Look at that. That's probably solid gold right there. Think about it.
That's supposed to be the sun god.
Mm-hmm. That's a shield, isn't it?
Actually, I don't know if it might be a shield, but I know people when they draw it, this is like on an altar. Like this.
Well, it could be a calendar, and I have an Aztec calendar on my wall over here. It looks kind of like that, but it's not gold, unfortunately. It's made out of stone, but there was a lot of that supposedly still out there. Tons of it. And what I mentioned to you earlier before the show, listen to this, folks. Okay, it's gonna blow your mind. It is estimated that only 9 to 10% of the gold on this planet has ever been found. That means 90% of it is still out there. Wow. That's a lot of gold.
Yeah, it is.
The Lost McCloud mine is rumored to contain gold nuggets as large as goose eggs. Over 44 people mysteriously disappeared in the honey looking for it. Yeah, I've heard about that, the McCloud mine. But now some of these things, like we said earlier, they're legends, okay? There's not a whole lot of truth behind some of this stuff. Some of this stuff. But like that guy with the symbol of Jesse James, you got to follow the clues to some of this stuff, If you don't have a map, what's the next best thing, girl?
Clues, absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes people find clues just in talking to people that were around at that time. It depends on like us, it'd be hard to do because there's nobody really left from that time period, depending on what you're talking about. But people find clues in family Bibles and diaries and lost relatives, or or somebody else has bought like sometimes people buy stuff at auctions or garage sales, and all of a sudden it's like, I can't believe this is in here. It's like the lost papers of somebody and buried treasure or maps.
Yeah. And that's kind of like that old story. I think it was a poem or something one time about, Grandma's rocking chair. Remember that?
Yeah.
They all laughed at him because the only thing Grandma left him was her old rocking chair, And they probably took all the rest of the belongings of the house and all that. And one day, when he really needed the money, he actually found that rocking chair was stuffed with money. And all this time he'd been sitting on his treasure, the money he needed. And Grandma, we all need a grandma like that, by the way. Anyway, Grandma had done him a big favor, definitely. And by the way, Philip, if you got a tree over in your yard, you examine it closely. fallen trees can sometimes bring up stuff in the ground. Absolutely. With the
You ever
moon
heard
says
of the
he's
Beale
found the
treasure?
gold.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the Beale treasure or not, Dennis, in Virginia.
I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear you.
The Beale treasure?
I lost sound there for a minute. I think I've heard of that, but you might want to enlighten everybody on that.
So this is in the 1800s, as you can see. I don't know if everybody can see it, but I'll blow it up a little bit. This old timer goes into it was like a hotel or boarding house, and he drops off an envelope and made a deal with the guy behind the desk, the owner, not to open this up unless I don't come back after, I think it was 10 years. And the guy agreed and stored it away, and never thought nothing about it. The guy never came back. So it was like 20 years later that he finally opened up the envelope and found this in it. It was a cipher. So
And I tell you, there's some very clever ciphers out there. Edgar Allan Poe used to do ciphers and stuff like that. Fascinating stuff. And there have been some serial killers that have left behind ciphers that to this day they have not cracked the code on yet.
Right.
But I think there was one guy, you might remember this, Gerald, one guy that's just in recent times actually buried a treasure of diamonds or something, and he left clues to us. You remember that? And they looked for years looking for this, and finally somebody did find it, and they read the clues right. I remember reading about that, but it took like maybe 15, 20 years for somebody to finally find this treasure that the guy, but it was a treasure hunt kind of thing.
Right. That was, I think you're talking about the Forrest Fenn treasure. So
Roger Blair says he's got his great grandma's old cast iron skillet. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you scraped the black off of that and it was gold, would it? That would be good. Definitely.
So I think you were talking about Forrest Fenn, which this gentleman is Forrest Fenn, and he's loading this box up with gold and gems and all kinds of trinkets, and it was supposedly worth more than $1 million. So he hid this.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
He hid this, and this was the big hunt that everybody was trying to find it, like you said, for over 10 years. And he would give out these generic maps and a poem that he wrote himself about places and markers on the trail. And people spent forever going out there in the deserts and all over on these trails trying to find it. And finally, like you said, it was finally retrieved after 10 years.
Well, you've heard about the gold and emerald rune, haven't you, Gerald? The gold and emerald rune is a treasure that's still out there. We don't know where it is to this day. But back in World War II, there was a palace. I think it was in Austria, somewhere like that. And the palace had a room in it, a very large room that was paneled with emerald and gold panels. That's it right there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, the amber room.
And the amber room. Yeah, I couldn't think of it. Anyway, that during World War II, the Nazis supposedly took these panels and put them on a train. And to this day, we don't know where they went. They disappeared completely. Rumor has it that there are some collectors out there that may have it.
Right.
To this day, though, it remains a big mystery what happened to the amber room and all the gold panels and all that. But that was worth a fortune right there by today's standards. I think it was valued back in Nazi Germany around like $40 million. Can you imagine how much that would be worth now? You're looking at hundreds of millions, probably close to $1 billion,
Now, these pictures are of the amber room now. they actually painstakingly tried to get the photos and match what the amber room used to look like. And so that this is all new amber and reproduction, and they try to duplicate the room. So there's, like you said, they're still trying to find the original amber room, the panels that the Nazis took down.
And there's a lot of other gold that the Nazis had that disappeared as well. And here's an unfortunate thing. There was a tremendous amount of treasure of gold taken from the teeth of Jews in concentration camps. They say that was worth nobody knows how much gold that was taken that way. I know it's bad to think about, but they would, gold was gold, right?
Right. And, not only that,
they did. It wouldn't stop it taking it out of somebody's mouth if they knew you had it. And here's an interesting thing about that. It used to be back in especially back in the 40s and 20s and on into the 18th century, people kept a lot of their valuable stuff in their mouth. They had gold teeth on purpose, so that they, if they ever needed it, it would be there.
Yeah.
You didn't just, usually leave that, in the coffin or anything, especially. There was a lot. That's what happened with a lot of these body snatchers. People that were grave diggers would go in and get the gold teeth out of corpses and get the rings off of them or whatever was left behind. That was a big industry back in the day, So that was buried treasure in a way, if you want to look at it that way. It definitely was buried. But there are bad ways to get this too, like all those people having to die in the furnaces in Nazi Germany and all that stuff, leaving their gold behind in that fashion.
Right. But, and not only that, Dennis, they went in and took masterpieces from the Jewish people off their walls. You had Van Goghs and Monets and all these masters that painted these pictures, and they took those too.
Anything that had a value, they would steal it. That was the way it went, just like it was in the Civil War. War creates treasures, definitely.
Yeah.
In many ways, yeah, absolutely. And a lot is still out there to this day. And like some of these masterpieces you're talking about, some of these paintings are still missing. But they think a lot of these things may be in the hands of private collectors that don't want anybody.
Right.
Here's the interesting thing about some of these collectors, Gerald. It's almost like a sickness. Some people got to collect no matter what. And they get on a stream of collecting some of it. It becomes an obsession with these people. And they will hoard stuff, even valuable antique stuff that should be in a museum for everybody to appreciate, And here's one more thing you got to look at. Museums supposedly take better care of these things than you could on a private basis,
Right. Also the Germans, they didn't just stop at people's houses or, museums. They also went into the cathedrals and churches and took relics from there. They got in the whole the Vril thing where they were collecting artifacts that they thought was in touch with Jesus or had special powers, like the Spear of Destiny or pieces of the cross that supposedly churches had, and they stole those also.
And the Spear of Destiny. Yeah.
Right.
And, the interesting thing is that a lot of these artifacts, supposedly, which some of them are definitely fakes, I'm sure, but a lot of these artifacts are still missing. Like I said, those collectors may still be holding on to this stuff. Did you know there was one, I can't think of who it was, famous person. I can't think of who it was right offhand. He had an obsession with collecting things from the Alamo, things connected to the Alamo. I forget who it was. Somebody, there's a famous person I can't think of, but anyway, you can have an obsession with things like that, But like I say, if you're really cheating people by not letting them put it in a museum or having it out where everybody else can appreciate it too, that's not right.
I know people claim to have David Bowie's knife and Daniel Boone's skin coonskin cap. I mean, I don't know if how you would ever know it's really the authentic one from the Alamo or.
That's true. Matter of fact, I once saw him. I went to Smoky Mountain Knife Works, and they have a lot of antiques, and they supposedly are, authenticated. They had like Geronimo's knife, and by the way, you would think something like that would, look kind of pattern, but it turned out it was just looked like an old butcher knife. It didn't, look like something very well known like that, but it can fool you, definitely. That's why they say if they ever found the what's the one thing that mind's gonna blank. The cup that Christ used.
Yeah.
They said if they ever found that, it would probably look just like a wooden bowl. It wouldn't look like someone with jewels and all that on it, And that's the way antiques can fool you. Absolutely.
Yeah, the Grail.
The Holy Grail. I couldn't think of the name of the Holy Grail. If the Holy Grail still exists, it's just probably a little wooden cup like a bowl, because that's what they used to drink out of. It wasn't nothing fancy. You might have had a goblet like that in a palace of a king, but you wouldn't have had that at the Last Supper.
That was one of the best parts on Indiana Jones, when they had all those fancy cups and chalices, and he picked the plain wooden one with no jewels, no ornamentation.
It was the real thing, yeah. And of course, supposedly, according to legend, you drink out of it, and it will make you immortal.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That old, supposedly like a Templar guard watching the Grail, and it says, "Choose wisely."
Yeah. According to the legend. According to the legend of the Holy Grail, the true legend of the Holy Grail, they actually captured it was not used to make you immortal like Indiana Jones, but what it was supposed to be healing. You can like put water in it, pour it on a wound or an affliction, and it would heal because that falls in line with what the Bible says that his stripes would be for healing the nations.
Right.
That's the actual legend of the Holy Grail. It didn't have anything to do with immortality,
right?
But
the healing,
it's very much like the Spear of Destiny. That would not make you immortal either. That would make you victorious on the battlefield.
I mean, it all stems back to all the miracles that Jesus did. So if you had, like the woman that had the cloth with the sweat and the blood on it, and the Spear of Destiny and the chalice or the Grail. I mean, it would be because of all the people Jesus healed, the deaf, the blind, the limp, he healed them all. So they were figuring that his blood or anything from his body would be that great of a power.
That's very interesting. Like one of my favorite miracles that was performed, and it's very interesting how that was done. But it always boggles the mind when you think about the ramifications of it. That the blind man came to Jesus and said, "Lord, I want give me my sight back." And Jesus said, he said, the man said, I've been blind from birth. He had no eyes, And Jesus actually spit on the ground and made mud with his fingers and rubbed them on his eyes. He recreated that man's eyes. That's amazing when you think about that. That is an act of creation there, folks. And only God can do that.
Right. I mean, there was tons. I mean, there were so many miracles they couldn't even write them in the Bible.
Oh, yeah. That's what Paul said, I think, yeah. That all the books in the world cannot contain it. But there's a lot of, the legends. A lot of legends around lost treasures and stuff like that are just that, legends. They may not exist, but if you find something like that has clues to it, like that thing with Jesse James or something like that, that's a good little illustration. anything with clues that you can follow that will lead you to something like that. There's a little more to it than legend. Then you know what I'm saying?
Right. Absolutely.
Yep. Especially if it's something like a sunk ship, you can find the cannons. You know, most of the time, the only thing left of the ship are the cannons and the cannonballs and the ballast. You know, and that's what
Right.
you find. But we always have in our mind thinking about a ship under the water, and that's not what they look like when you go to look for them. Archaeology is that way. Like I've been interested in archaeology my whole life. When I was a boy, I used to dig holes all over the yard, which infuriated my mother, by the way. I used to dig up all kind of weird stuff. But anyway, you never know what you may find once you begin to dig a hole. That's the interesting thing. It's like I said, it's hitting the lottery. You know, you may hit it, you may not. You may just end up with a hole and putting the dirt back in it. But which is what I had to do. I ended up putting more dirt back than I took out mostly. But anyway, I found some interesting stuff. Some things I wish I could go back and get away from myself now and bring back with me. But you know, most of the time you're gonna find trash. But hey, here's the interesting thing, and I've talked to archaeologists about this. You know, they love to find trash piles because there's all kind of stuff in the trash piles. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen a lot of like we talked about England and the UK. There's a lot of times they will go to an old boarding house or where an old boarding house used to be, and they would dig up where the trash pile was and find the pottery and, you know, stuff like that, and clay pipes and all kinds of drinkware. You know, that's what they love because it tells the history of the society or the people that were there.
Bottles, all kinds of stuff, you know. And interesting thing, I was reading the other day, I don't know if you heard about this, but they were remodeling a theater in a very old theater in England. And they and behind one of the facade at the top of the ceiling, they found a bottle with a note in it.
Oh,
You remember that? Did you read about that? Did you hear about that?
I might have. I can't remember it right now.
Well, what it was, they had renovated this thing like 100 years before then. And the guy that was doing it left a little time capsule in this bottle. And it was really strange because the renovators come into the modern day renovators found it. And he left a little note behind. So that's interesting, you know. And we used to do that when we were kids. We would put notes and stuff like that on balloons and send them out. But I've always wanted to throw a few bottles with notes out in the ocean there and see where they would head. But anyway, it's interesting when you can leave something that transcends time like that. And that is another treasure that people look for, are the time capsules that are put in places for that purpose, you know?
Right. I mean, when we remodeled our guest bathroom, it was me and my youngest daughter, Taylor. We when we took out the medicine cabinet and it had the slot for the razor blades at the bottom of the cabinet, you know, you take your old razor blades and go down in between the walls. Well, we left a note behind the mirror when we put the mirror back about a buried treasure, and we threw something else down in that little hole. So if anybody ever buys our house after we're gone, you might find a message behind the mirror.
There you go. Leave a little something behind just in case, huh? But I've seen a lot of YouTube, I guess you have too, where people have renovated their house, find boxes up in the attic or the basement, you know, with some old stuff in it, stuff like that. You never know.
Right.
You never know what you'll find. But, you know, I do know the story. Listen to this. This guy, he was like 16, 17 years old. Okay. And one day his neighbor, she had a big old house, had been there, you know, she'd lived in it forever. And his neighbor paid him, you know, he was like 15, 16 years old, something like that. Paid him like $10 to clean her attic out for her, you know. And, you know, she'd get rid of all that junk, you know, it's got rats and squirrels in it and all that, you know. She'd clean it out, you know. And so he was going about that, and he found some magazines stacked in one of the rafters, you know, up there. And he took the magazine rack out, the magazine stack out, and put it in a box, and was taking all this stuff out to the dump, you know, to trash cans on the side of the road. And he looked in there and he said, "Wait a minute, what is this?" And an old comic book in there, in mint condition, a #1 Superman, worth
Wow.
$500,000.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing what you will find, you know. And there's a real famous painting that somebody, modern day painting, which shows this guy at a yard sale and they're walking around looking and laying there on the ground in a bunch of magazines. One of them is a #1 Superman.
Wow.
Yeah, you never know what you may find at your next garage sale, you know?
Yep. It wasn't that long ago that somebody got an original picture of Jesse James out of a garage sale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he paid a couple dollars for this picture, and he kept thinking, man, this looks familiar. Something about this picture looks familiar, and he zoomed it in, and it's like, actually, it's Billy the Kid. I'm sorry, it was Billy the Kid, not Jesse James.
Playing croquet, wasn't he?
Yeah, out there with the family and the gang.
Well, I'll tell you what happened to me one time when I was a kid. I actually cleaned out a woman's an old garage she had. And she just told me to throw out everything, you know. And actually, I found a mint condition pitcher, a little small pitcher, you know, the drinking pitcher, like. And it had Shirley Temple on it. I still got it, matter of fact. That's worth about $100 now, something like that. But I actually was able to find some other ones online, you know, and they give me a price on it. But it was in very good condition. Got a picture of Shirley Temple on it.
Yep. My mom had a set with the pitcher and the glass saucer. And then she had all the teacups and the little saucers all in blue glass.
Yeah, you have the whole set's worth more. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So my sister now has that whole set with Shirley Temple's picture on it, and it's made out of real pretty blue glass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's blue looking glass. Yeah. Very old looking kind of.
Oh yeah.
Back when I made real glass.
Yep.
Yeah, but I have actually looked at a lot of glassware like that. I can kind of spot some of it. The older kind of glassware, and there are collectors who collect nothing but glassware, folks. Yep. And they look for the marks on it, the China marks and all that on these things, you know, like Sheffield China and all that.
I have my fluorescent light, ready to go when we go to Goodwills and places like that, because I want to start collecting some radium glass that glows.
Oh yeah, radium glass. Yeah. I don't know if I'd want to drink out of it.
Supposedly,
I could have it, but I don't think I want to drink out of it.
Supposedly, in the right amount, you know, drinking out of the blue glass and the milk glass and the radium glass gives you some health benefits. So you'll have to look at it. Maybe too much is a bad thing, but in moderation is probably good for you.
I tell you, remember those? You remember those glass? I don't know what you call those things. They used to be on telephone poles. The round glass globe looking thing.
Yeah, insulators. Yeah, insulators.
You can find them. Those are collectibles, you know.
I have some.
I tell you what else I got sell a lot. I got 3 of them, I think. You know, you remember the old flambeaus, don't you?
The what?
The round flambeaus that would sit on the road, you know, and they'd light them.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I got 3 of those. Yeah.
They always looked like the bombs you'd see in the movies.
Yeah. But that was back in the days before they made cones. They had them things sitting on the road to warn you about a hole in the road or whatever. But they called them flambeaus. I think that was the name of the company that made them. Flambeau or something like that.
You know those telephone pole insulators? I found somebody online that will take them and they put a small like Edison light bulb in the middle of them, so they make night lights and mood lighting out of them, and they look really pretty. That green glass really glows pretty.
Mm-hmm. Blue Eye Bandit says she has actual photos of Annie Oakley, my grandmother, rode the old Wild West shows with her. Buffalo Bill on the ranch show. That might be worth some money.
Wow, Buffalo Bill Wild West show. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff out there, you never know when you're going to run up on treasure. That's the interesting thing about it. And it may not, like we said earlier, gold doubloons and diamonds and pearls, but it may be other kinds of treasure that, especially antique kind of treasures.
Yeah. I want to find some pieces of 8.
Oh, yeah, pieces of 8, definitely. And gold doubloons and pieces of 8. And you know why they call them pieces of 8, don't you?
Supposedly you can break them off in sections.
Right, make a piece off. That's how you made change back in the old days. You cut a piece of it off. An eighth of a coin was worth like a pence or something like that.
That's like gold bars and stuff. They would just take their pocket knife or whatever they had and just scrape off a little chunk of it, and there you go. That ought to cover it.
I stopped one day. Listen to this now. This is wild. I got it sitting right over here. I'm looking at it right now. I saw it one day on the side of the road. And there's some boxes on the side of the road, and one of the boxes out on the road. So I stopped, moved out of the road, And I looked down. I said, "Well, what is?" I saw something in the box. There was a bunch of stuff in it. I'm always looking for books. And I said, "Oh, look, see if there's any books." I didn't see any books. I saw something and it kept, stuck in my mind. What is that? And I started to leave, and I went back. I said, "No, I know what that is now." It dawned on me what it was. So I went back and pulled out of the box. It was a speaker from a drive-in theater.
Oh, wow.
I got it. I still got it. It was in mint condition. I mean, I could probably hook it up as a speaker, and I'm thinking of all the stuff you would find. What in the world was it doing in the box? With a bunch of junk in it. Somebody didn't know what they were throwing away.
My best friend, his brother was had a construction company, and he always did movie theaters and drive-in. So I have 2 of them up in my garage, and one of them I have converted over where I can plug it in and actually use it as a speaker now. But I found another place on the internet where you can get those speakers, exactly the same speakers, and they have them for Bluetooth now, so you can use them as a little portable radio.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be neat. But there's a lot of people drove off with those speakers and broke their windows sometimes. Especially if they've been drinking a lot of beer that night, watching a movie. They forget the speakers on there and drive off with it. But I remember going to drive-in theaters when I was a very little young kid. But there is still one drive-in theater, probably about 30 minutes from where I'm at, 30 or 40 minutes, that still operates. You can go, and they've got like probably at least 10 screens there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got a big place, and they run like 2 or 3. You get your money's worth out. You can stay there all night watching movies. You know what I'm saying? They got the concession stand. They got all that, and somehow or another, I don't know how they did it. Somehow or another, they have treated that place where there are no mosquitoes.
Oh, Disneyland does that too.
Sit there with your windows down, all evening and watch movies.
Disneyland does the exact same thing. You'll never get bit by a mosquito at Disneyland.
It's probably some kind of electronic thing that kills the mosquitoes or something, draws them away from there or something like that. I look for bug lights, but there are no bugs. Bad thing about bug lights, they usually draw bugs to you instead of away from you. Yeah, kerosene heater from the 1800s. I've got an old kerosene heater from the 1930s and 20s. It does. I think slightly has a leak, and I wanted to get it fixed one day. You could use this thing.
Wow.
But I don't know if you could still find the kind of a wick. It had a wick in it. It's just like a giant lantern. You know what I mean?
Right.
A railroad lantern. But it's got a wick, a big round wick in it. I don't know if you could ever find one to replace it now. But that thing is an antique. It goes way back. But you never know. You never know. And here's the weird. I'm gonna tell you this quick story before we close out tonight. When I moved in this house, I spent about 20 years ago now, 24, 25 years ago. There was a woman lived next door. And you never know what other people's got, This is a strange story. But I got to talking to her one day, and she said, "Well, right before you moved in, I sold a World War II machine gun
Ah,
from a German fighter plane
oh my
that
gosh.
my deceased husband had up in the attic." And I'm going, "My gosh, you would never believe that." That you, I said, "Dog, I got here too late." But anyway, I love to have that.
Right,
And what it was, he was in World War II, and he shipped this thing home. And you know, some of them were shipping Jeeps home, one part at a time. You know, they were doing
right.
all kinds of. Back then, you could ship anything.
When my dad came back from World War II from France, he was on the boat, and they all had their weapons still with them. You know, they had their M1 Garands, and everybody was saying, "Okay, I'm gonna break it down, put it in my bag, you know, and just walk off the ship." Well, dad had a conscience and said he was afraid to get caught and didn't do it, so he left his behind. But all of his buddies walked off the ship with their guns.
I'll tell you a quick story that happened to me several years back. I was investigating his house, and there was a lot of paranormal activity going on in his house. And well, one reason was a witch lived in the basement. This is a long story, folks.
Oh,
I'm not going to get into this tonight. I have to tell this case one day. It was a very interesting case, but I won't talk about the witch tonight. She lived in the basement of this house. But anyway, I'm walking around this house, okay, and you never know about these things. I'm walking around this house, and I talked to the woman that owns this house. Her husband was very uncooperative. He said on the porch, "You won't mention it." So I'm talking to this woman. I say, you know, other than the witch, this was her daughter was a witch who lived in the basement. Okay. I said, other than the witch, I said, there's something here in this house. I just get this feeling of darkness here, you know, bad vibes here. And she said, well, it might be this. Come in here a minute. And so she took me in, and then a little room off the bedroom, sort of like an office. Okay. She walks in there, and this whole room, Gerald, is full of real, authentic Nazi memorabilia.
oh,
There's a flag, there's medals, there's knives. I think it might have even been a Luger in there.
oh my gosh.
I mean, all kinds of Nazi stuff in here. I said, oh, God, no wonder I'm picking up on this, you know? I said, no wonder you got problems in this house. You might want to think about donating all this to a museum or something. I would not feel good living with this, okay? And on top of this, the woman had a gun that her stepfather murdered somebody with.
Oh my gosh.
She finally gave me the gun, wanted me to get rid of it for her, you know. Oh, I have to tell this story one day. It's very interesting. It was
That
very
would have an
strange house,
attachment to it.
and the people who lived in it was very strange. I have to tell this whole story one day. But anyway, that woman gave me the gun. It was a Derringer, okay, a 2-shot, 22 pin. She said she actually saw her stepfather kill a man with his gun, and he left the gun to her when he died. Okay, and she said, "Look, I don't want this thing anymore. I don't want this thing in my house anymore. I don't want it in my life anymore." I put gloves on, okay? I said, "Give it to me, and I will take it from you, and give it to me, and I will get rid of it for you, the right way, you know." And when you know, and the weird thing, Gerald, when she handed me that woman, I could see it, just like 100-pound weight lifted off of her.
Oh wow.
She was so happy to get rid of that, you know, and but here the point of the story is you never know what you may encounter and what other people have. You never know.
Right. You know, it's amazing that you talk about that, because when you do clearings and stuff, you know, the whole atmosphere changes from a dark feeling to a more warmer happiness feeling. And sometimes you can see, like what you were talking about, you can actually see people's faces change. All of a sudden they get the brightness back in their eyes and the smile. It's almost like their whole face changes.
Well, here's what I told them. I mean, I was very honest with her. I said, "Look, with this stuff in the house, the witch in the basement, all this going on, I said I will bless you, and I'll do what I can. But I said I'm not going to, guarantee this because you still got some stuff here. You still got a problem, and it's not going to be solved completely." And and she told me one, and unfortunately, I never got to go back. But she said, I will, will address this and try to, but I think, see, her husband owned all that stuff. And he wouldn't let her get rid of it. I think that's what it was,
Ah,
Mm.
I'd like to get a hold of a Thompson machine gun.
Oh yeah, I'd love to have one of those. I'd love to have one of those German Lugers. I don't care about it having killed anybody, but I'd love to have one of the Lugers. So that's a very, iconic kind of a gun,
I think I think Ruger actually makes those still.
Actually, I had a chance to buy one time, but it was rusty and all. And I said, well, I just, I wanted one in good condition, They fire 9mm,
Right.
And I wanted one I could, have for self-defense. I didn't want, it could have been restored, but it would probably cost a lot more money to have it restored. You know what I mean?
Right. And a lot of times when you restore it, it loses its value.
Yeah, it does. But I've seen people take stuff, and I love to watch them on YouTube and all that. They find these old things. They find a gun in the water, all this stuff. They can restore it almost new.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work. And if you had that done, it would cost you a whole lot of money.
Yep. I like watching those videos.
Mm-hmm. Well, it takes a lot of time. That's what is so valuable about it. That's the thing about if you take your automobile to get your work done. They're going to charge you a lot for parts, but they charge you even more for the work.
Oh, right.
I think right now it's like $120 an hour for just a mechanic to work on your car.
Right. Yep.
So you're talking about, if these car warranties really are worth their weight in gold to a certain extent. But some of them you got to watch out for. They will wiggle out of the deal on you if you don't watch out.
Right. Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing show tonight, folks. I think we hit the treasure, man. We might have to do a part 2 on this one day and go back and revisit some more treasures.
Yeah, there's some more treasures we can probably talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them out there, definitely. Especially when you get into archaeological type treasures, Bible treasures, and all these other things, the ancient historical treasures. The list is very long and large, absolutely. And Gerald, the one thing that really makes me angry about some of this stuff, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and you being a podcaster, you know what I'm talking about, too, is the sheer audacity of some of the powers that be that keep us from knowing some of these things, that want to lie about history and not tell us the real truth of these things. That's what really sticks in my craw and hard to swallow. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
Hello, audio.
You never know what the force is.
That's not fair to be. It's not good to treat people that way and try to hide things of history, trying to rewrite history to what all that, and try to hide stuff. That's not good.
Yeah, you never know what the forces have in store for us. They change the route of history. They change the maps. They change the history books.
Yeah, it's true. History should be sacred, but they don't look at it that way. Absolutely. You got any final thoughts on the treasures tonight, Drew?
Well, we said before, when you go out to garage sales or auctions or even Goodwills, take a close look, spend some time. I mean, there's been people that have found original copies of the Constitution of the United States when they signed the Declaration. So you never know what you will find in books. I mean, you got to thumb through the pages because people shove stuff inside the pages. Sometimes people find stuff in paintings and the backs. They take off the backs, and all of a sudden there's like original documents back there and hidden stuff behind that paper that's covering up the canvas on the backside.
There you go. You know, well, it's like that old saying, Gerald. One man's junk is what?
Another man's
Another
treasure.
man's treasure. Yep. Absolutely. And you never know when you might be looking at treasure instead of junk. Absolutely. But, you know, I have found a lot of things just looking around. I've even done a little dumpster diving in my day, okay? You never know what you might find, but it's fun. It's one part is fun finding, the other part is fun looking for it too, you know? That's the fun
Absolutely.
part.
The hunt is always the fun part.
Oh, yeah. Well, appreciate you all showing up tonight and your support. And thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been a fascinating, I think, we got just almost an hour and a half into this, and it's been a great show. And Gerald, you got anything coming up this week you want to remind everybody again?
Yeah, Wednesday night will be the Night Owl Lounge, and that starts at 10 p.m. and sometimes goes to 2, 3 in the morning. And we just hang out with everybody in chat and talk with them and whatever they bring up. And sometimes we'll get on a subject and we'll just wait, you know, while away the hours. And then Friday, Saturday on our Rumble channel, we show the old creepy movies, the black and whites, the Lost in Spaces, Dark Shadows. We just started X-Files, and we always have a movie at the end. And then Sunday we have Piercing the Veil at 6 p.m. Central. We got Heidi Pop from LA on there, and we're going to dig into her because she used to be a Midwest girl, you know that? And she's appeared in a couple movie pictures.
Oh, okay, yeah. I've been in a couple myself. It's fun. I do a little acting. Actually, I've done some voiceovers and commercials as well.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, and of course that's been some time back, but yeah, it's fun to do stuff like that, definitely. And I'll have to dig up the film where I appeared on that show, that paranormal show, and let everybody watch it. I did with Ghost Asylum. That was an interesting show. And so I've been on national TV several times. So it's always fun. Yeah, been in a couple of movies, national TV. I was an advisor on a movie one time.
Wow.
They asked me some questions about it, and they put my name up at the end. I didn't do a whole lot of advising, but there you go. Anyway, the fun, you know, here's the interesting thing about Hollywood and all that kind of stuff to me. It's, you know, it's one thing when you watch it, you can kind of believe it, but when you see behind the scenes, it kind of takes a lot of the magic away from it, you know?
Right.
So it's kind of like finding out a magic trick. You know, it's fun to find out the solution, but you kind of lose something when you do, you know?
Well, maybe someday you'll see me in a movie. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, you never know.
I could be a
popcorn out.
I could be a biker, a prospector. I can fit a lot of roles.
Yeah, the old prospector. Yeah. You could be like, you know, a biblical prophet there or something there.
Oh,
a robe on you. Yeah,
I could be, or I could be Gandalf.
Yeah. Let's see. It says my nana that rode with Annie Oakley was the first stunt woman. She saved a baby from a buffalo herd on horseback. Lord of mercy! You need to write all that down. You need to make record that kind of stuff. That's history. And Gerald and I both said a lot of times on this show, no story, no matter what it is, should ever be lost to history. You know?
Yeah, that would be a good book. That'd be a great book on family history. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. Nick of Time was one of the movies, one of the first talkies. Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of the stunt people that we have today, their beginnings began with the old movies, the old westerns, especially because the westerns had a lot more stunts in them, And which one was it that I cannot think of his name now. It might have been Tom Mix, one of the very famous old cowboy stars. He was actually killed in a car accident.
Oh,
What's his name? I can't think of his name. Anyway, what happened to him? He had been on somewhere in Arizona or somewhere like that, making a movie. And this was back on in the 30s or something like that.
yeah. There's a lot of.
And he was
there's a lot
coming
of,
back. He was in his car, okay, and he was in a convertible. And was coming back. Somehow or another, he ran off the road and the road dipped or something. And his car went off down in the thing, and one of the pieces of his luggage came out of the back of the car and hit him in the back of the head and killed him.
Oh wow!
I think remember which one that was, but he was very well known. And when the real Wyatt Earp was buried, you know who one of the pallbearers was? John Wayne.
John Wayne. Wow.
John Wayne. Yep.
A lot of stuntmen became mainstream actors.
Oh yeah, John Wayne was one of them. He was originally a stuntman, and several of them were. They were stuntmen. That's where they finally one day somebody said, "Hey, let's get you out here and get in front of the camera and stuff."
Yeah.
And there you go. Rest is history. But a lot of them started that way. Yeah, I said back in the old days, I would love to have been a stuntman because it was probably fascinating work, man. Probably get you killed, but but there was one actually. I think got injured very badly in the old original Stagecoach with John Wayne. He was supposed to. You remember that scene, that very famous stunt scene where he goes up under the stagecoach while it's going down the road?
Right. Yeah.
Remember that? And I think the guy actually got run over by one of the back wheels of the stagecoach. His leg did, I think, or something like that. I think he didn't kill him, and I think it paralyzed him.
That's another thing, like the movie Ben-Hur, all the accidents and animals that were killed and stuntmen that were killed during making Ben-Hur.
Oh yeah. I think a chariot overturned or something, didn't it?
Yeah, some of those action parts in that movie, when you see it on the screen, people really did die while it was filming those parts. They kept it in the movie.
Blue Eye Bandit says you can Google some of her. Her name was Estelle Vonderheide Duval. Sounds like she might have been Dutch, a little Dutch there, huh?
Oh,
Vonderheide. Well, we'll have to check that out, everybody. Check it out. That name kind of sounds familiar to me. I heard it somewhere before. No. But anyway, that's a lot of movie history, definitely. I love the history behind a lot of this stuff. Reading about what they did. Of course, John Wayne. A lot of other people probably got cancer from the location. One of the locations they did,
right,
which was where one of the nuclear tests were done. And I think like 30 some odd people worked on that movie came up with cancer.
Yeah. There's a very famous picture of John Wayne and the woman actress laying on the rocks that had radiation to it, and they were out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was Rita Hayworth, wasn't it? Something like that.
I can't remember.
Rita Hayworth.
I think so.
And she got lung cancer too, just like he did. John Wayne had lung cancer, and they took out one of his lungs, and he lived like 30 years like that. But the cancer returned. I think it was stomach cancer when he came back.
And his last movie when he had cancer was The Shootist.
Mm-hmm. The Shootist, yeah. That was sort of his swan song.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, he had his very famous horse in that he rode a lot. He said, "I want that horse in my last movie. That's my favorite horse." And I think the horse's name was Dollar. Like a dollar bill, Dollar. So I love to read all the background stuff on that kind of stuff. But It's fascinating stuff when you get into that. Well, appreciate everybody being here tonight, and it's been a great show. And you might want to tune in Wednesday night. It's Werewolf Wednesday on Hunting the Shadows. We're going to talk about some stuff you don't ever hear about with the werewolves this time, okay? We're not going over old ground. We're going over some new ground on this, okay? So you definitely want to tune in for that and Paranormal Point of View. And we'll let everybody know that we have... Gerald has a store, by the way.
Oh.
Gerald, tell them about your store.
Yeah, if you go there now, we have... we introduced a new shirt, Space Penguins. It's off of the old Encounter. That you can find newspaper clippings of it and stuff. Of the aliens look like space penguins. They look like penguins, and their spaceship was a mushroom UFO. So we have that logo on one of our shirts, and then we have obviously our Midwest Night Watchers shirts and Chiro Sounds. My wife's merchandise is on there with her logo, and the Night Owl Lounge. If you like the Night Owl Lounge logo, you can buy shirts with that. And we have hats and drinkware and magnets and all kinds of stuff on there.
Sounds good. Well, tell them I sent you. We might get, I doubt if you'll get a discount on that. But anyway, tell them I sent you anyway. But yeah, definitely. We want, we ask them to please support our partners and everybody that we're in with. Support Jessica, the Cryptid Huntress. Make sure you check out her shows and check out her channel. Check out Gerald's and Shiro. I think Shiro's got a little channel of her own too.
She does. She has a music channel called Chiro Sounds, and one of her videos is starting to take off pretty good. So her last one is getting some play on YouTube. So go check out Chiro Sounds, please, if you like meditation music and singing bowls and Native American flutes.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So check that out too. That's interesting stuff there, definitely. And support that and subscribe to it. Ring the bell on it. And make sure you let them know your support's behind that, definitely. And some other people we got too, Beyond the Box, support them. We have our good friend Bigfoot Michigan Rob, support him. Check his channel out. We have Chantel Mayberg, and that's Aquarius Rising Africa. Check her out. She has some great shows. Also, I do some good shows with the Duchess, Danielle Diva Borzon. Matter of fact, we've got one planned, I think, coming up this Sunday. She had to work. We were going to do this last Sunday, but she had to work. So we're going to do next Sunday on that. And by the way, I'm going to get her as a guest on my show one day. Y'all will love this woman. She is actually a direct descendant of Dracula. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And she can tell you about some wild. So I want to get her on here and talk to you about the Gypsy Death Cult. That's wild stuff. You'll blow your mind. But I have to get her on here as a guest one day. And she has some fascinating stories to tell. Definitely from Romania, her home country. But we appreciate everyone for being here tonight. And we thank you for your support. And if you want to support us, also, Hunting the Shadows has a Patreon. You can support that. Let me see if I can put that up for you right quick. We have a Patreon. We also have membership open we have membership open on YouTube, the YouTube channel. We also have PayPal, and we also have a Cash App. If you want to support us anyway, that will be greatly appreciated. And we want to thank you all so much for tuning in tonight and looking for lost treasure with us, okay?
That's right.
You're the real treasure that we got here, okay? Don't you forget that. And we appreciate you very much. We love all of you, and take care, and we hope you have a fantastic week out there. Remember me, I've got to go for a chest x-ray Friday. Hopefully it will turn out good. They've got a couple of spots I want to look at, so hopefully everything will turn out good on that. So be keeping me in your prayers, definitely. And I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. And Gerald and I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, definitely. And thank you so much. And we want the rest of you have a fantastic week. And until we get together again, Godspeed and ciao.
Good night, everybody. God bless.